Welcome to Masonic Memories, where we chat with senior members of our lodge and reminisce about events, people, and their contributions to our fraternity. Pull up a chair, grab a coffee, and listen to the way things were back in the day as we meet on the plum, act on the level, and part on the square. Today we're going to sit down with Stephen Weston, a man known for delivering charges, teaching cipher, helping Santa, and perhaps he'll tell us of his heroic activities on the night of December 7th, 1975. We're here with Stephen Weston, who I've known for 43 years or more, and he's always been an active Mason, but I know it started long before that. Steve, how did it start?
Well, I was in DMLA. DMLA is a young men's organization sponsored by Masons at that time for 14 to 21, and then later on they lowered it to 12. So I was in DMLA and I enjoyed the comradeship of with the other boys and stuff. And in Masonry, in DMLA, when you become 21, you receive what they call your majority, which means that you can't hold office, you can't vote, but you can come to the meetings, but you can't hold office either. So basically, it's a gentle push that you're out. So the next obvious progression for me was to join Masonry. So I was eligible to become a Mason in the January, February, March class. However, it was full. Back then, you could only have 5, period. So I went April, May, and June. So in June of 1955, I became a Mason. In September, I became 22.
Who was your sponsor?
I'm not sure who my sponsor was. The thing is that there were a lot of members of the First Baptist Church, which we belonged to, that were in the lodge at the time. So I'm sure one of those brothers sponsored me. When I was raised, I was not raised by the master, who was Marsh. I was raised by Arthur Whittemore, who was senior warden at the time. And he was very good friends with my dad. And my dad was a Mason for about 10 years before I joined. And he joined in Maynard. And a lot of people say, well, why didn't you join with your father's lodge? And I said, well, because I was in Marlboro DMLA, and a lot of the church members were members in Marlboro. And I knew a lot of the Masons from Marlboro. So.
And who were some of those?
I can't pull them up right off now. You have to understand, that was 1955. I'll be a Mason in 2025 for 60 years, so.
Congratulations.
I am sure I am the longest member of United Brotherhood Lodge that comes to the meetings. And I probably am the oldest Mason still alive that is a Mason in UB.
Were the third degrees different, or the degree work?
Third degrees were a lot different. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, the political correct police came in, and there were edicts changed. And as Leon said, it's been more deemed a more somber affair. However, back when I joined, the penalties for betraying your obligation were very severe. They've changed that. When you took your degrees, the ruffians were ruffians, also referred to as the gates. Perry O'Leary was a guard in Concord prison. He was, well, let's say a small man in stature, but he was really, really built. And to say the least, for the most, he put you on your toes because he was the first ruffian. His brother Leroy was the tiler. Back then you were allowed to smoke in the lodge. He smoked like a chimney, and he stayed as the tiler station outside. And there was a table in the anteroom that he would set out all of his Masonic memorabilia and stuff. You could buy pins, rings, knickknacks, car emblems, all that kind of stuff. And if you wanted something and he didn't have it, he'd have it for the next meeting that you could buy from him.
And Leroy, I believe, was Tyler for 50 years.
Could have been, yeah. He was there a long time.
Do you know anything about the third brother, Bob?
I have no idea.
Okay. What positions have you held in the lodge?
I've sat in every chair. I've done ritual in most all of them. Well, every year the lodge has to submit a docket of offices to Grand Lodge for the ensuing term. And one year they said they were going to submit it without a junior warden. I said, no, they can't do that. I won't stand for that. Grand Lodge would look down upon United Brethren Lodge if we submitted a list without a junior warden. I will do it. So I did the junior warden's part. But I told the past masters and the master that I would do junior warden, but I did not want to become master at that time. So that's what it was. I spent a lot of time, a lot of time doing junior deacon, and I really, really enjoyed that chair of the line. Spent a lot of time as inside sentinel. Masonry in general, and United Brother in particular, is cyclical. There are times when you have 10 guys who want to be in line and there's no room for them. And then there's times when you can't even beg to get somebody to be in line. So there were times when it was, I would stay as inside sentinel or junior deacon for several years at a time. I went in and out of Masonry depending on my life. When I first joined, I was pretty active. Then I started at work. I worked for Digital Equipment Corporation, and a lot of the years I worked 5 nights a week, and I couldn't get to lodge. So that I was, quote unquote, out of lodge, so to speak. But I tried very hard when I could to come to lodge, and then I started teaching cipher classes, and I did that for quite a while, and then life changed and I had to give it up, and then I came back, and so on and so forth. Maybe the last 5 or 6 years, I took over for brother who's now worshipful, Paul Harris. Now, Paul Harris was basically the cipher instructor, but he didn't want to have to interface with the master. So I was the lead instructor, but he did all the work. And when he had an issue that had to go to the master, he would go to me and say, hey, this is a problem that I want you to talk to the master about. So, but then he left, and a couple people came in, and then recently, Andy Staley, worshipful Andy Staley, was the instructor. However, where he worked, they'd say, oh, we want you to go to the Springfield plant for the next 2 days. And he couldn't be at the teaching cipher. So I took it back over from him, and I've been doing cipher for probably the last 2 or 3 years.
Think of you as the father of the Canadian charge, but tell me whether that's correct or not.
No, that's not correct. I talked to Alan Archibald, who is really the keeper of the charge. And I said, do you remember whose idea it was? Because it wasn't mine. At that time, I did the charge with all 7 verses and the preamble. And he said he thought it was right worshipful, but at the time, probably worshipful, Rob Jesse that had the idea. But in any case, after one of the meetings, we went downstairs, or maybe it was a rehearsal actually. We went downstairs to the banquet hall, and there were a bunch of us together, and we basically said, well, what if we did this, and what if we did that, and how would we do this? And we decided that we'd really like to have 7 people do it, because the Canadian Charge is basically a poem with 7 verses. And so that's how it became. Now, when the master always thinks I'm in charge, because I do the preamble in the last verse, but I'm not. When the master comes to me, a new master comes to me and says, we want you guys to do the Canadian Charge, I say, talk to Alan. And Alan sends out an email to everybody that's done the charge before and says, we're doing it again, we're doing it, this is the date, and would you guys like to do that charge? And what verse would you like? And that's how it progressed.
And there's a preamble before the actual poem.
Yeah.
And what inspired you to write the preamble?
I just thought that the poem was cool, but you needed some context of what was happening when you got the charge. So I wrote the preamble basically as like an introduction. This is what we're going to do for you, and this is the charge we're going to give you. So that's why I wrote the preamble. Now, I don't believe that any other lodge does a 7-man charge. There are several lodges that have one guy that will do all 7 versions, which I used to do before we did the Magnificent 7.
Where were you on the night of December 7th, 1975?
I was home. Now, I'm not sure how I knew that the lodge was in danger. Sean Kelly was a firefighter brother Sean Kelly, was a firefighter in Sudbury, and he was one of my rentees next door. Now, he always had a scanner going, so I don't know if he told me or he was working, and his wife told me, hearing on the scanner that the Masonic building in Marlborough was in jeopardy of being on fire. So I went over. Now, to me, everybody says, well, the building burnt at night. Well, yeah, it did burn at night, but it was in danger in the afternoon or a late evening for sure, because it was light out. Now, Leon says when he got there, he saw me bringing down the drawer of neck collars and aprons. Well, that probably was my second trip into the lodge. I took that drawer over to my uncle's house, who lived over where the new street is that goes to the housing for the elderly. Well, they actually tore down his house in order to build New Street. So I brought it over there and said, hey, could you mind this for me? And I went back. When I get back, I went, oh, goodness. The Bible and the square and compasses are up in the anteroom. So I went upstairs with my friend Jerry DeGrace, and by then it was getting smoky. And when you went into the lodge room through the main door, to the left was an alcove, and there was a piano in there. And on top of the piano is where we placed the Bible and the square compasses, because at that time we had Eastern Star, Commandery, Rainbow, and D. Malay meeting in the building. And so you couldn't leave your Bible on the altar because everybody had their own Bibles for their ceremony. So anyhow, I got the Bible and I brought it back down. And then I went, oh, I have the keys to the DeMolay room. Now, my first trip up, I helped Dad Woodward, who is the dad advisor for Rainbow, to get some of the Rainbow stuff out of their closet, if you will. I had the keys to the DeMolay closet. I said, well, I'll go up and get the DeMolay stuff. Well, I tried to go up the stairs, and there was a fireman there, and the fireman said, no, it's too involved now, you can't go upstairs. And he stood guard and wouldn't let anybody out. And so I think I was probably the last Mason in the building.
Let me understand, Risberg's next door was on fire, that was in flames?
Yeah, but that was on the east side. I was entering on the west side off of Newton Street.
You came in that Newton Street side,
Newton
okay.
Street exit, yeah.
And you went in, how many times did you go in?
I think I went in 4 times.
4 times.
Yeah, the fourth, I was trying to get in the 5th and they wouldn't let me in.
Can you describe what the building was like to me?
Well, Leon described some of it, but on the east end on Main Street, there was, like he said, the entrance to the 2nd floor. And when you went up the stairs, at the head of the stairs was the master's room. And then you turned right and went down the hall. And as he said, there was Christo's in driving school up there. But what he failed to mention, maybe he didn't even know, about 3/4 of the way down the hall, there were 2 rooms. The first room, they were the game rooms. And the first room had overstuffed chairs and overstuffed sofa and a couple of card tables in it. Then you went through an archway into the second room. And the second room had a billiard table, a pool table, and several card tables. And I spent a lot of time playing pool there. So, but you had to know somebody, I guess. At that time, worshipful Arthur Pratt, known as Skippy Pratt, was master, and he and I were pretty much friends, and Sean Kelly. And we would play pool up in the pool, on the pool table. So then outside, when you continued farther down that corridor, you turned left and went up a flight of stairs. Oh, no, excuse me. Yeah, a slight flight of stairs, and you made a landing. And that landing was from the Newton Street entrance. And then you turned left and went up those stairs to the lodge room. Now, the lodge room was on the 3rd floor. But the banquet hall was on the 4th floor over the lodge room. Back in the day, the Eastern Star put on the meals, and the Rainbow Girls would serve the meals. And some of us wise DeMolay boys would go early and bring the 50 pounds of potatoes up to the 4th floor. But then we'd hang around and do the dishes, and while we were doing that, we would probably end up with a date for Saturday night with the Rainbow Girl.
I was involved in Rainbow when there was probably 10 members or so. How many members were in Rainbow and DeMolay in the days you were speaking of here?
Oh, I would say probably 20 or 25. Mm-hmm. I believe the Rainbow left Marlboro and went to Framingham, and the DeMolay basically just folded. The last time DeMolay was a DeMolay chapter in Marlboro, I was one of the dad advisors, and we took the last remaining 2 or 3 guys to Worcester, to the Worcester DeMolay, so they could be involved with DeMolay. And it seemed like every September I would have 6 or 7 boys that were interested. In June, when it was over, they'd be active, and then they would just disappear, and we'd have to start all over again.
I don't think I ever saw you and Santa Claus in the same room together.
Oh, that's because I was Santa Claus. The lodge used to hire a Santa Claus for a considerable amount of money to do Christmas party, and I thought that was kind of a waste of money. And so I asked the senior deacon who was in charge of the children's party and the master at the time, and said, hey, if I got a Santa suit, could I be Santa and you wouldn't have to hire one? And they said, well, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So that's what I did. So I was Santa for a lot of years. But being Santa is kind of a funny thing. Some parents are so eager to get the pictures for their kids that are sitting on Santa's lap that they're oblivious to what the children are saying or what Santa's saying or anything. And some parents actually get involved in when a kid asks for something that to me sounds very expensive, or they want a puppy or something like that. If the parents are paying attention and they give me the wink and say, yeah, that's okay, I would say, yeah, I'll get that for you. And if they said no, I'd say, well, I'll try and get that, and I'll see what I can do. Now, fortunately, during this time period when I was doing Santa, the movie with Tim Allen, that's it. Tim Allen did a movie called Santa Claus. And in Santa Claus, one of the main characters was Bernard, the senior elf. So I would tell the children, because they all knew about it, and I'd say, well, you know, if the parents gave me the nod that they didn't want their child to have that, I'd go, well, I'll check with Bernard, but we've been running low on those, and I'll see what I can do. And if I can't get it for you, I'll put something else under the tree that you can play with that you'll like just as much, I hope. So and that was because of an incident that happened when I was a young parent. Back in the day, there were these equivalent to the Ninja Turtles that became out popular, and there was the red one was the popular one. You had to have a red one. Well, my daughter just wanted this red one to save her soul, and I went everywhere. I went to Framingham, Natick, Worcester, Leominster. Could not find a red one. So I brought my daughter to the Masonic Christmas party, and she sat on Santa's lap and she said, I want a red blah, blah, blah. And he went, oh yeah, I'll get you one of those. And I'll never forget the sadness in her face when she didn't get that red, whatever it was. And so, being Santa, I would never, ever promise a present, whether the parents said they were going to give it to him or not. I would say, I'll do it my best and get you something. So.
Do you ever do anything special for a kid that was scared of Santa Claus?
That's a funny thing. Some kids will sit on Santa's lap, some kids won't. I have a picture of my youngest daughter with her arms stretched out like this, trying to get off of Santa's lap because she wouldn't want to sit with Santa. So I never forced a child to sit on Santa's lap. If the parents sometimes would even come over and hold the child next to me and get the other parent to make the picture.
Well, so. I remember you did something very nice for the Park family with the Santa.
Yes, I was asked for a private showing of Santa. And I came to the house, there was a present outside, and previous to which they gave me some insight into things that happened at school and stuff. And so when I went in to have a private session with Lindsay, I mentioned things that happened at school and so on and so forth. And her eyes got as big as silver dollars. She was so amazed that Santa was there and do all of that stuff. And it was really a fun time, more fun than even being Santa at Lodge. Santa at Lodge is a funny kind of a situation. There are kids that want to sit on Santa's lap, they don't want to say a word. And then there are kids that'll get on Santa's lap and tell you their life history. And those are the kids that are so much fun to be with. So, but the private session was probably the best time I ever had as being Santa. Okay, the murals, there were two on the south wall. No, east, let me think about that. Yeah, the south wall. One on the east end was of Jacob's ladder, and there was a figure standing there. I assume it was supposed to be Jacob. And the one on the west side was the Virgin weeping with the broken column. Now these were actually paintings on the wall, murals, but around them, wooden casements, if you will, that made them look like pictures, picture frames. And they were starting to get a little bit cracked and stuff, and we were going to have some students from a college in Worcester, an art college, come and redo those paintings. And unfortunately, the lodge burned before they were done. Now, the only other place that I've seen things that are similar to that is in the lodge in Natick, a Meridian Lodge. They have paintings and stuff on their walls. But yeah, they were huge. They had to be 15 or 20 feet across and maybe 8 feet tall. They were big, very big.
Colorful characters.
Colorful characters. Well, I can only think of one instance when this actually stood out in my mind. And that was Dick Johnson decided that he would have a fashion show with lodge brothers dressing up as women and showing their wares. And several of us participated. It was really a fun night. But the best part was the last person in was worshipful Eddie Craig. Now, you have to understand that Eddie Craig was probably in his 80s maybe, or maybe even older. He was one of the oldest past masters, actually the oldest past masters at the time. And he came in a wedding gown. And I mean, the place went crazy. It was the funniest and the most amazing thing that I've ever seen. And he is one of the most interesting characters that I've seen at that particular time. There have been others, but that's the one that I remember most.
What are you most proud of in your Masonic history?
What I'm most proud of as a Mason is the charity that we do. We first started out being a charity to ourselves, but since we've evolved, we've become a charity to other things and other people. With the Chris Trust, the Angel Fund, and more especially the car show, we have been able to donate to the Shriners Hospitals, the Children's Hospitals, and so many other worthwhile organizations. That's what I'm most proud of.
I believe it's called the Trungent. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
The marshal walks around with?
Yes.
There's some history to that.
Yes. Worshipful Gunnar Johnson owned a machine shop. Johnson and Claflin had a machine shop, and he actually made that truncheon, or the baton, if you will, that the marshal carries around. He made that in his machine shop and donated it to the lodge.
Do you have any advice for new Masons?
New Masons? Yeah. First of all, get involved. They're always looking for somebody to help in the kitchen for a collation. Come to the rehearsals. Be a candidate. You always need somebody to be a candidate so they can practice on. Not only that, but when you're there, you will hear the ritual over and over and over again. And you can then decide if maybe you want to be an officer or not. Also, you should see the 3 degrees at least 3 times before you decide to go to any higher York Rite or Scottish Rite. Most important, get involved. Don't be a card carrier, be a Mason. Past masters enjoy being a master, because you'll be a past master soon enough.
Remember the pink degree?
Pink degree, yeah, that was several of the wives of Masons decided to put on a degree for us, that what they thought went on at a Masonic meeting. We wrote the ritual for it and everything, and it was a very, very good night. It was well received by the Lodge brothers. One of the women came in with a mannequin on her back, and she carried that mannequin around as a new brother, and that was pretty amazing. It was a fun night.
Okay, Steve, I think this was a fun discussion.
Thank you for having me.
And I want to thank you. It's a pleasure talking to you.
You're welcome.
I hope you enjoyed this discussion. There will be more chats with senior members of our lodge. We will reminisce about colorful characters, the 1975 fire, past activities. You may learn where our lodge furniture came from, who made our altar, and hear about the infamous pink degree.